Hey, it is Brittany, CEO and founder of Talented Teams Consulting, and I am back with tonight's live stream. So I am so happy that you joined tonight. If you're watching on the replay, let me know down in the comments that you're watching on the replay. I want to make sure that I can connect with you and engage with you if you have any questions throughout tonight's live stream. So I just started yesterday a facilitation of a course, the SHRM HR Department of One Strategies for Success program. It's a 10-hour program, and I'm working with a cohort over 5 sessions over 2.5 weeks. And it's an instructor-led program that I'm facilitating, but there's also a self-study component. So participants, once they complete the entire program, they take an assessment and they walk away with an HR Department of One specialty credential. So as an HR Department of One, it's sometimes difficult to understand and know if you're doing everything correctly, if you're on the right path. So what I love about this program is that it helps those participants and anyone who's interested in learning more about what it takes to be a successful HR Department of One. It helps you to know that you're doing the right thing. It helps you to put strategies around talent acquisition, employee retention, balancing dual and priorities, and all of those things. In last night's session, we talked a lot about employment branding. And one of the pieces of employment branding that we talked about, we didn't have time to really dive into it, was the topic of stay interviews. And so I wanted to kind of go live tonight to talk more about stay interviews, my approach to stay interviews, and how I believe there's a very easy way and very tactful way to improve your employee retention efforts. So if you are joining live, say hey to me down in the comments. Again, if you're watching on the replay, say hey in the replay or put hashtag replay in the chat. That way that I know that you were here. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what a stay interview is and how you can easily and impactfully update and improve your retention numbers, your turnover, and with something as simple as a conversation. So I think it's really important that we have this conversation because there's so many things. There's so many things that are happening in the world today that is changing the way that we are required to perform as HR professionals. So the employees today are demanding something different now than they have in the past. It used to be that employees would stick around, for their gold watch and things of that nature. But employees today, they're not going to stick around out of loyalty alone. There's got to be a promise of there being something more, and they need to know that you as an employer understands and values them as a person, not just a number in the organization. So I believe that's why stay interviews are so important to do, because then we're going to talk about a lot of those reasons for that as well. As we go through tonight's conversation, if you find that you're going to need more help ironing out the details of your own strategy, whether it's a stay interview strategy or anything else, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I think I'm going to put the link it's going to start scrolling at the bottom of the screen. The learn@talentedteamsconsulting.com, learn.talentedteamsconsulting.com. You can connect with me there in a variety of different ways. But I want to just make sure that I'm providing to you resources for you to be able to have that impact within your organizations. So right now in 2023, we're experiencing record numbers of employees quitting their jobs every month. I was saying last night, and I've also shared this in a summit that I spoke on last fall. Since 2021, there's been 4 million people to quit their jobs every single month. So that's why when we go to the grocery store, when we go to the restaurants, when we go to any convenience store anywhere, it's difficult to find anywhere that's completely staffed. Employers everywhere, industries everywhere are really hurting from a people perspective. And also at the same time, believe it or not, unemployment is at a record low. So anyone who wants to work is likely already working right now. So what do you do as an employer if you're finding yourself trapped in this cycle of trying to figure out how can you keep people in your organizations? I believe that stay interviews is a really easy way to do that. And there's a lot of benefits to doing that as well. So one of the easiest things that I always talk about is controlling what you can control. So as an HR Department of One, there's so many things that are outside of our control. People are always going to people. So we can't control if a person has to, leave unexpectedly, or if a person, if 2 people don't get along, or if a manager is not managing, correctly. Those are certain things that's outside of our initial control. But one of the things we can control is the way we interact with people. And I believe that being engaged with your workforce is very, very impactful. And you can be engaged in multiple ways. Stay interviews is just one way that you can be engaged and also improve your turnover numbers. So let's kind of level set a little bit. So when I say stay interview, a stay interview is really just a set of questions that you're going to ask. Typically, some people do, the managers have the conversation. I prefer that the HR department has the conversation, especially if you're an HR department of one, you have a smaller organization. So I believe it's just that much more important for you to be able to control the conversations around that type of thing. But it really is just a set of questions that you're asking in a conversation. You want to kind of get to the bottom of why is the person still in your organization and what will have them to decide to leave. Think of it relates to an exit interview. But if we had to compare an exit interview and a stay interview, an exit interview is more reactive. So the damage is already done. The person has already told you that they're going to leave. So you can request that someone complete an exit interview, but even at that point, they don't owe you anything. So they might not want to complete the exit interview. And at that point, the only thing you can do with that data, that information, is to make it better for those behind that person. So instead of doing the stay interview, instead of doing the exit interview, what I like to do are stay interviews. And in one of the organizations that I work with, we do what I call HR follow-ups. So in our organizations, we do HR follow-ups for every employee, if they are a new hire, if they have a promotion, or if they have a transfer. Because those are very tentative times in the employment relationship, and things can go left really, really quickly. So we build in these scheduled conversations at 90 days and then again at a year to make sure that we have a finger on the pulse of what that person is experiencing. So the reason behind completing these stay interviews, the benefit of it, is that it shows that you value that person as a person. The questions that you ask, you're asking those questions because you want to be in tune with what they're experiencing. You're not just sending them out there to thrive on their own or to fail on their own. You're really showing your concern. Also, it helps you to see things that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Because remember, once you hire a person and now they're on the job, they're on the floor, if you never circle back to talk to them, you don't know what kind of experience that they're having. They could be having a great experience, but they could also be having a negative experience as well. So having these conversations in the scheduled intervals helps you to be able to know what you wouldn't know otherwise. And then also, it helps you to get actionable data. So we'll talk about this a little bit later in the conversation, but having that data helps to make decisions so that you know what you're trying to accomplish from what you get. And ultimately, I believe that the biggest benefit of these stay interviews is that it builds trust. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes as well. But building trust as an HR department of one is crucial because it seems one shot to get it right with some people. You have to make sure that you're doing everything on purpose and with purpose. So stay interviews is just an easy way to do that. So in my opinion, the key components of a successful stay interview is you have to set the expectation. So in our organization, we let people know once they are hired what to expect. We tell them that in the very first onboarding meeting, like, hey, we're going to be circling back and talking with you in 90 days. We're going to circle back and talk to you again at a year in. And that's not to say that we're not having conversations other times as well, but having these scheduled conversations really just helps to set the stage for that person's expectations of the organization as well. You also want to explain the goal. So let them know what we're trying to accomplish by the stay interviews. We're not trying to push anybody out. We're not trying to find a mole. We're not trying to do anything nefarious. But the goal is to figure out ways that we can figure out how can we improve our own systems? How can we improve our processes? How can we identify any gaps that we have? And then you also want to actively listen. So the conversation will do you no good if you talk to the person, they're giving you great feedback, but it's going in one ear and out the other. You got to actively listen. And then the last thing you've got to do is use the data wisely. Again, it doesn't make sense to have these conversations and then not do anything with the data that you get. That will undermine your credibility if you do that as well. So I believe that it's important to retain employees today, specifically in 2023, because we're in a very tight labor market. Like I said before, with low unemployment, people are shifting within their career expectations, and the people that you have If they're doing a good job, you want to keep them. You want to make sure that you don't have to use your resources, whether that's time, whether that's money, whether it's your team, to bring other people into your organization, because the cost of turnover is high. Data shows it's like 100 to 150% of that person's salary. So think about, again, your time, training, lost productivity, all of that plays into turnover. So if there's anything that you can do to avoid that, you want to do everything that you can. For those of you who are just joining, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. Tonight, I was just inspired to have a conversation really quickly about stay interviews and how I feel they're very impactful ways to not only improve your turnover numbers, but also to increase your retention. So I'm just really inspired to have this conversation. The impact of employee turnover, again, if you don't have these type of strategies in place where you're working proactively to make sure that your employment stays relatively stable, the impact of that is, it's going to be really felt. You're going to have a stressed team. They're going to be overworked. They're going to feel like they're not valued because they're going to be pulling double duty. And then you're going to lose more people because you can't find the people that you need anyway. So again, you've got to figure out ways to fill these positions. You've got to figure out ways to build in strategies to make sure you're not just continuing to spin your wheels. So I believe that identifying the needs and the concerns of these employees in these state interviews is going to help you to identify what the problems are. Because like I said before, out of sight, out of mind. You want to avoid the head in the sand mentality. You've got to make sure that you're continuing to keep a finger on the pulse of what people are experiencing. So what I tend to do with my stay interviews at 90 days is really still introductory period. They just finished their new hire training. I'm sure they've been on the job for a few months. So at 90 days, the conversation is different than it is at 1 year in. So at 90 days in, we're asking questions like, hey, how's everything going? Did the position meet expectations? How are you liking the job? How's your relationship with your manager? How's your relationship with your team? Did you feel prepared going into your position? All these questions, you don't have to ask every single one. Again, leave the questions open-ended so that you can make sure that wherever the conversation flows, you can follow that person and have deeper conversations, flesh out their responses a little bit. But the goal here is to get them talking. You want them to know that you're taking what they're saying seriously. But at the same point, if you hear something that is actionable, if you hear something where maybe they didn't feel prepared from their training, maybe they can tell you specifically where there's a gap. Maybe there's something that they needed to know that they didn't hear about until it was too late. How can you figure out ways to improve the experience? But then again, at a year, the conversation is different. So you're following up on that 90-day conversation. But maybe then at a year, you're saying something like, you've been here for a year now. How are things going? Has your opinion shifted since you were 90 days in? Are there any new things that you want to try now? Are you interested in growing in your position? Are you interested in doing anything new? What do you like most about your position? What do you hate about your position? What are your biggest challenges? All of these things to really dig into the person's perception, the person's perspective, the person's experience are really going to be critical to you understanding what they value, what their experience has been. It's going to help you to make better decisions for those that come behind that person. I believe that if you don't figure out ways to address the issues that people might have, for example, maybe there's an issue with a manager, or there's an issue with a team member, or there's training deficiency, or maybe that person's just dealing with something in their personal life with their family. Having these conversations, and that's why I like for HR to have the conversations, because we can know how far to go if a person delves too far into their personal life. But having these conversations just helps to show you in a personal light. It helps to personalize the HR experience. And specifically as HR department informed professionals, I feel that it's super, super critical for your team to trust you and to know that they can come to you and talk to you openly. But you got to make the space to make that possible. So for example, when I have those conversations, or when a member of my team has those conversations, one thing that makes it critical, you've got to build the rapport, create an environment for these conversations to happen. This is not going to happen overnight. You've got to get used to it. Your people have to get used to it as well. But you have to go into it expecting them to share. So that means you have to create an environment in which they want to share. So you've got to be trustworthy. You've got to be credible. You've got to be open and personable in that way as well. Bottom line, you got to encourage the person to speak freely and without distractions. So one of our go-to phrases, if we're sending a message or we're sending an email, we ask the person to give us a call when they're able to speak freely. The last thing that you want is for someone to be answering those types of questions with a coworker or a manager standing on their side. You want that person to be in an environment where they can speak candidly, they can speak freely. You're going to get the truth out of them. So whether that's coordinating with them on their break time, whether that's them going to the break room when the break room is not being used, whether that's them going to the car and calling you on their cell phone from the car on a break or something like that. But figure out ways to get creative. Or even if it's you going to go talk to the people. If your team is small enough, you might be able to make in-person visits. But the goal here, you've got to create an environment where it's going to foster trust. You don't want people to feel like if they say anything, it's going to be like a gotcha, like, oh, you're not doing a great job. It's like, no, I want to support you to help you to do a better job. So bottom line, if you have these conversations, the worst thing that you can do is go through all of these steps. You build the rapport with the person, you set the expectation with the person, you have the conversation, you listen actively, and then you do nothing with the information. That's the worst thing that you can do because that's going to undermine your credibility as well. If a person is telling you something that is actionable, that you can actually do something about it, you can fix the training issue, you can fix the issue with the manager, with a team member, or something like that. If they're telling you things and nothing is going to come of it, then eventually they're going to stop sharing things with you. So you've got to be clear on what you will do and what you say you will do, and what they feel the expectation is in terms of what's going to happen next after the conversation. So I just was really inspired to have this brief conversation about stay interviews tonight. I hope this has helped someone out there who's thinking about ways to improve the quality of the culture within your organization. Remember, culture is subjective. What the best culture for one organization will be different from another. But with every organization, you want to make sure that there's trust. You want to make sure that you're being credible. You want to make sure that the people around you know that you're capable of being able to shift the needle and make things happen when it comes to your area. And as an HR department of one, retention and turnover, these should be your top priorities. So if your CEO comes to you and asks you, what are we doing about this? You should be able to tell them, him or her, this is what I'm thinking. I think we should try this strategy and see what happens over the next 18 months. So having these things in place is going to help you be more proactive and not reactive. I know that as an HR professional, especially when we're working by ourselves, we're always in firefighter mode. We're always putting out fires. We're always doing a lot of things, and we're being very reactionary. But doing things like this is going to help you to be more proactive, more strategic. And again, that's going to position you to be more better positioned for a career growth opportunity in the future. If you do these things well today, it's going to help you to improve your career potential in the future. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to drop them down in the comments. If you've already dropped them down in the comments, I will circle back and answer them for you as well. If I can serve you at a higher level, feel free to book a discovery call or a strategy session with me so we can sit down together and I can actually help you to map out some strategies for your unique organization. Remember, every organization is different and your people are different. So you've got to make sure that you do what matters to them and you figure out what it takes, again, to move the needle for your team. So again, if I can serve you at a higher level, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm at Bryttani Graddick with Talented Teams Consulting, and I will talk with you on the next one. Have a great one. Bye.